Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to the Valentine's Views podcast, where we are about to spend another fun Monday talking about yet another New York Giants loss as the Giants fell to 2-13 on the season with their loss on Sunday to the Minnesota Vikings. And here to help me break it all down is Big Blue Views Tony DelGenio. Morning, Tony. How are you?
I'm good, Ed. Thank you.
Hey, so at this point, I don't know, Tony. At this point, are we out of words?
Yeah, pretty much. So there's not a whole lot left to say about this team.
No, there is not. But but we're here. There are some things to discuss, and the first thing I want to discuss is this narrative that came out of Sunday's game that Jaxson Dart is regressing. And I wrote this morning that I disagree with that narrative. And it came from a lot of places. A lot of the beat writers were saying, "Oh, he's regressing. He's not playing as well since the Giants fired Brian Daboll." And maybe that means they shouldn't have fired Brian Daboll. And all of this, and he's not playing as well since he came back from the concussion. I looked at Sunday's game, Tony. I've been waiting for, to be honest with you, I've been waiting for the game that Jaxson Dart would play, where he looked like a confused deer in the headlights rookie quarterback. And it finally came on Sunday against Minnesota, against Brian Flores, who's one of the most aggressive, creative defensive coordinators in the league. And go back to the week, and I thought the Giants were kind of expecting this to be a very difficult game for Jaxson Dart. And for me, I just looked at it, and I looked at it as it's nothing more than a bad game for Jaxson Dart, a rookie quarterback kind of game, a kind of game that every rookie quarterback has at some point. And the he's regressed, he's bad, he's not the answer, we've got to draft Fernando Mendoza stuff, I think is all just, people jumping off the cliff, people going way overboard. Just your thoughts on the whole Jaxson Dart has regressed narrative.
Yeah, so I don't think that Dart has regressed. What I do feel is that the play calling has regressed, and my impression is that Mike Kafka doesn't have a whole lot of confidence in him, and so he has gone towards uh, calling plays very conservatively when Dart is the starting quarterback. When Kafka took over for Brian Dable, we saw lots of creativity when Jameis Winston was the starter. I mean, they pulled everything out of the bag that they had in the bag in that game against the Lions, right? But
Mm-hmm.
once Dart came back, not so much in the New England game, but I thought last week against Washington, which has a poor defense, they played a very conservative game with lots of first down runs, and third running on 3rd and 20 once again against Washington. And I'm sitting there watching it. It's like, are you trying to win this game, or are you just trying to get through the 60 minutes? And then I thought they took it to extremes yesterday by basically running him all the time. And I guess I'm a little bit perplexed with the other narrative that's out there that that the Brian Flores defense is this terribly complex, hard to diagnose, thing that you just can't do anything with. I mean, the Vikings have given up more than 20 points in most of their games this year. This is not the 1985 Bears. It's not the 2000 Ravens. defense, right? Speaking of the Ravens, when Eli Manning was a rookie, Tom Coughlin threw him to the wolves, had him start against Baltimore in Baltimore, and it was a very awful experience for Eli. It was probably the worst game of his career, and was kind of reminiscent of the stats that Jaxson Dart put up yesterday. But they still let Eli pass the ball. I went back and looked at the play-by-play of that 2004 game in Baltimore, which the Giants lost 37-14, I think. And they still called mostly passing plays for Eli Manning, even though Ray Lewis and the defenders were playing games with him at the line of scrimmage, trying to confuse him about who the Micah was and so on and so forth, right? They were toying with him, but they still let Eli pass the ball and take lumps, and they finally took him out, at some point in the second half, and let Kurt Warner play again. But I'd rather see them go down that way and give Jaxson Dart the chance to win the game, and at least send him the message that we have the confidence in you to try and go win the game. Yeah, at this point they're not playing for a playoff berth, and so I wasn't sure what the game plan yesterday was intended to accomplish for the Giants beyond not embarrassing Dart. And by not letting him even try to pass the ball most of the first half, you're embarrassing him anyway. And so that was my objective to the way Kafka approached the game.
Yeah, and I think you and I talked about this a little bit on Sunday night, and we disagree to an extent. I will agree with you that I thought there were, against the Commanders, there were a few instances, like 3rd and 20, running using a run play, which didn't get them anything and didn't get them a really makeable field goal, was questionable. There were a couple of times when I thought Kafka was a little bit too conservative in trying to play for a field goal and things like that against Washington. Where I disagree on Sunday is, I think that in your piece, in your four things we learned piece on Sunday, you referenced the 2021 Joe Judge game against the Chicago Bears, where that was Mike Glennon at quarterback. The first time the Giants tried to pass the ball, Glennon fumbled it and it turned into a Chicago touchdown. The second time he tried to pass the ball, it got intercepted. It was 14-0 before the Giants even completed a pass or got a first down. Where I disagree is the fact that game was 22-3 at the half. Okay. And in that entire game, Joe Judge never replaced Mike Glennon, but they threw 11 passes. They threw 11 passes in that entire game. Glennon was sacked 4 times. I think he scrambled once or twice. I actually went back and looked all of that up this morning. They were behind 22-3 at halftime, and they spent most of the second half running the ball. The last time they had the ball, the last 2 minutes of the game, all they did was hand the ball to Saquon Barkley 3 times to run out the clock. I thought clearly Joe Judge had given up and said, "The heck with it. We're not winning. We're just gonna try to run out the clock and get out of here and go home." I thought yesterday the Giants ran 56 plays. There were 31 designed run plays. There were 25 plays that were called as pass plays. Now, Dart only ended up throwing the ball officially 13 times for 33 yards. I thought there were times when the Giants could have thrown the ball on first down, maybe used some play action, maybe taken a shot, maybe done some things different. But I can't compare it to the 2021 game because there were 25 pass plays. Plus, I also feel like without the Brian Burns play at the end of the first half, which made it a 1-score game, which made it a 3-point game, I think the Giants come out in the second half down 10 points. And I can't say this for sure because I'm not inside Mike Kafka's head. I'm not, I can't think for him. But I believe that the play calling, that the game plan would have been a little bit more wide open in the second half if the Giants came out down 2 scores. I felt like the fact that the game was so close, the fact that the Vikings were playing a rookie or JJ McCarthy, who was struggling, and then Max Brosmer, who is a very inexperienced quarterback. I thought the score of the game dictated that the Giants could continue to play that way. I didn't think it was a give up by Mike Kafka. I thought it was more of him feeling like that was the best way for them to finally try to get a win, which didn't work out. And I also felt like, I get the fact that Minnesota's defense is not the 85 Bears, but I did think what we saw right away in that game was the Giants couldn't pass protect for Dart. And when Dart was looking down the field, you saw instances where he was running around and he had nobody open, which is another reason why later on we need to talk about the Giants receivers, but either there was nobody open or he wasn't sure what he was looking at. So, and I think Mike Kafka knew that. So I didn't see it as a give up. I thought Kafka felt like the best way for them to move the ball, the best way for them to give themselves an opportunity, was to lean on the run game as much as they could. Whether or not he has confidence in Dart is something else we can discuss, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay. Well, so my counter to that and is that, the one thing you mentioned, right? The play action pass does exist.
Right.
RPOs do exist. And where was that in the first half of that game? Those are ways to blunt a pass rush. And of course, what Brian Flores was doing, he was blitzing a lot. I think he was blitzing more than half the time against them. And right, blitzes are supposed to be the type of thing that a quarterback invites, because there's always supposed to be a hot read for you to go to when the other team blitzes you, that you can make them pay for it a little bit. And so I really thought that Kafka was playing into Brian Flores's hands by just saying we're mostly not going to even attempt to pass at all. And when I then see that, I say, well, what's the purpose of starting Jaxson Dart in the first place if you don't want to give him experience trying to diagnose this defense? Even if you have disastrous results, the way the Giants did with Eli against Baltimore in 2004, don't you want to give him a chance to try to learn how to read the defense and give him a couple of things he can do toward that end? If you're not going to do that, then, and your main goal is you just want to try to find a way to win the game, then why not sit him and start Jameis Winston, instead, because Jameis Winston probably would have given them a better chance to win that game yesterday. So I just didn't really, get that philosophy. I didn't think it did anything for Dart's development as a quarterback, which I feel like should be the number one priority. And I'd rather see him take his lumps and get intercepted 3 times against that pass defense than to just have him handing the ball off all the time, which is sending a message to him that I think you don't want to send to your young quarterback. So those are my objections to what they did yesterday. It wasn't giving up the way Joe Judge was at the end of the season, but the play calling wasn't a whole lot different in terms of how many runs they called and how many passes they called in the first half of the game. That was really my objection. And I have to admit that since Kafka took over the team, I like some things he has done, but I haven't liked the way he's approached the use of Dart, and that's a B5 for them.
I do think with Dart, there has been there has been one major difference without Brian Daboll, and that has been the fact that Kafka is not using Dart as a designed runner to any great extent. There was a quarterback sneak yesterday, but there were no designed runs for Dart inside. There were no read options, where he could take the ball to the outside. And I quite honestly think that some of that might be on purpose to protect Dart from himself a little bit. And there's part of me that doesn't mind that, Tony, for the simple reason that using your quarterback, as the Washington Commanders look at Jaxson Dart and say he's a running back first, okay? Using him that way is not sustainable. And to me, in the long run, if you're in a playoff hunt and you're trying to win a game and it's close and you can and you can use his legs to get there, fine. But you're 2 and whatever at this point. And there's part of me that thinks teaching him to play quarterback from the pocket, making him play quarterback from the pocket without always saying, oh, well, if nothing else works, we'll just turn you into a running back and let you get beaten up and all of that. There's part of me that thinks in the long run that might be good for him. But, we'll see. Like I said, I do believe that there were some opportunities probably where the Giants could have used the play action, like you said. But when I just look at 31 runs to 25 called passes, and by the way, I pulled up that Eli Manning game against the Ravens from 2004. He went 4 for 18. Okay, so he went 4 for 18. He took 2 sacks in that game, I think, as I look at this. He took 2 sacks. So I don't know how many actual designed passes there were in that game, but I still come back to the fact that I think, Mike Kafka did have Dart drop back 25 times yesterday, which he only ended up with 13 official passes. He took 2 hits to the helmet. He took 2 helmet to helmet hits. He got sacked 5 times. The Giants had penalties, or there were penalties called on 5 of his dropbacks. So, so a lot of that got washed away. I do agree in the end, the game plan was conservative. I'm anxious to see if the game plan is more wide open this coming Sunday against the Raiders. I simply felt like Kafka thought that was the best way to win the game. But let's before we move on to another topic, Tony, do you just the whole idea of regression and this whole idea of he's not the guy and the Giants should draft Fernando Mendoza and trade Dart, I think is nonsense. Like I said, I think it's one bad game. Most of your draft analysts right now would tell you, because I'm seeing this, starting to pop up in the draft world, they would tell you right now that Jaxson Dart would be the number 1 overall pick in the draft ahead of Fernando Mendoza, if Dart were in the 2026 class. So I think some of it's an overreaction. Just your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I'd like to see the Giants get the number 1 draft pick as much as anyone at this point. So there's a comfort actually in watching them lose these games, and I, like everyone else, are scoreboard watching, trying to see whether the Raiders can pull out a win or something like that, and what Cleveland's doing and what Tennessee's doing. And Tennessee, thank you, won yesterday, right? So, so I'd love to see the Giants get the number 1 draft pick, but not so that they can take Fernando Mendoza. Again, no knock on Fernando Mendoza. Okay, I think he looks like he can be a good NFL quarterback, and he's really come on this season for Indiana, and I think he's shown that he can be big at clutch time at the end of games. I mean, he's had a couple of really impressive drives to win games or prevent the opponent from losing games down the stretch for that team. So I think he will certainly be the number one pick. I would just like to see the Giants have the number one pick so that they can trade down with the Jets or the Raiders or whoever to get a boatload of picks that they can use to fill in some of the many holes that seem to still exist on this team. I do not feel that Dart himself has regressed as far as the running the ball goes. uh, I do think they need to do less of it than Brian Dable was doing with him. I don't think they should take it out of his repertoire entirely. And I think you limit him by never giving him the chance to do that. And so I would like to see 2, 3 designed runs a game, or at least RPOs where he's got the option to run if the pass isn't there, just so that you keep that in the mind of the defense, and the defense doesn't just know what's coming all the time. And that's I think my biggest beef with Kafka is that I feel like he's calling games in a way that the defense just knows what they're doing. And the trickery, it's not, I don't want to even say trickery, but the normal kind of deception that good offensive coordinators put into their game plan has just been missing these past several weeks. And I feel like Kafka emptied everything out of his bag in the Detroit game. Okay, but and then after that, he said, "Okay, I've used up all the things. Now I can't do it anymore. Now that Dart's back, and yeah, I'm sure you can do more with Jameis than you can do with Dart, because Jameis is a veteran. But I feel like he's doing Kafka's doing Dart no favors by not creating a more interesting game plan for him. So I think there's a middle ground somewhere, and I don't think Dart has regressed. I think he has. He's now got a bunch of stuff on tape, and right. Opposing teams know what he's got on tape, and so you have to then be able to counter that, and that's part, I believe, of the normal growing pains.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think I just feel like there's been some overreaction to the fact that this was a 33-yard passing effort by Dart. But if you look back at history, I think in my column, I referenced the Eli Manning game. I referenced a couple of bad games, 80-yard passing games by Josh Allen in his rookie year, a 60-yard passing game by Bo Nix a year ago. Troy Aikman went 1-15 as a rookie quarterback. Peyton Manning set the record for interceptions, in his rookie year. So a bad game from a rookie quarterback is nothing to jump off the bridge over. I think that you have to move on from it and see where it goes. And I think that when it comes to Mike Kafka, I think that Mike at this point has made it clear that he's not going to be the next head coach of the Giants. So I think that, with Mike at this point, it's a whatever. And, we're just trying to get through the season at this point. Mike may think he still has a shot at the job, but I think it's pretty clear at this point that he probably does not. Something else that I wanted to talk about, Tony, it became really clear to me yesterday, when Brian Daboll got fired. Ownership said, in reference to Joe Schoen, they said, well, we think we have a really good young talent base. And the intimation of that whole thing was, and I have largely agreed with it, that the Giants talent is better than 2-11 or 2-12 or 2-13. But watching that game, and I know there's no Malik Neighbors, and I know there's no Cam Scattaboo, but Tyrone Tracy's a pretty good running back. But the more I watch this team, the more it becomes clear that the talent, there are some pieces, but the overall talent just isn't very good. Look at what Justin Jefferson, and I know Justin Jefferson's an all-world wide receiver, okay? But he picked up 2 first downs where they threw the ball to him 2 or 3 yards, past the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 11 and 3rd and 12, and he just picked those up on his own. And on 3rd and 15, he came up with 14 or 14 and a half yards. And I don't remember if Minnesota went for it on 4th down after that play. I think they might have. But so, and then game-winning drive, 3rd and 17. Justin Jefferson makes a superstar play, diving, out of bounds, on the sideline to make a great catch, get both feet down in bounds. That's a superstar play. And the more I watch the Giants, they just don't have enough of those guys. The more I watch, the less I'm convinced, especially when it comes to offensive playmakers, the less I'm convinced that the talent is as good as I really thought it was.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because actually I've started to work on an article about receivers and what the Giants' needs are in this next draft. And what made me start thinking about it was watching that Rams Seahawks game, which was an amazing game. And it was amazing. I mean, not just in the back and forth, but just the high quality of the play on offense by both teams. And I'm watching those games, and I'm looking at Puka Nacua, and I'm saying to myself, this guy catches everything. And then on the other side, I'm looking at Jackson Smith-Jigba, who's a much younger player. But this guy catches everything too. And I said, that's what the Giants don't have. I mean, there are lots of things that the Giants don't have. I mean, okay, but on offense, which is what you were originally mostly referring to with the Justin Jefferson reference, the Giants don't have that go-to receiver who catches everything. And the point I want to make is not even Malik Neighbors is that guy. Malik Neighbors is amazingly talented.
I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking the same thing when you brought that up. Not even Malik makes all of the plays that you think he should make. So, and with that said, I'm going to let you finish.
A little bit of drop. Yeah, he had a little bit of a drop problem in particular. I mean, he makes spectacular catches. He's great at getting open. I'm thrilled that the Giants have him. I think he's one of the best receivers in the NFL already. I would say he's a top 10 receiver. But drive killers are when you drop passes or when you can't get open and make contested catches. And when I watch that Rams Seahawks game, I'm just saying, God, these guys catch everything that comes their way. And the Giants don't have a guy like that. The closest they have to that on offense is actually Wan'Dale Robinson, and who's having a really good year for the Giants and may even crack 1,000 yards if they pass the ball enough in these last couple of games. Hopefully they'll do that next week when they're facing a bad defense. But the Giants don't have that go-to guy that can keep drives going. The thing is, you don't always need the spectacular catches, the explosive plays. Those are great too. But to score a lot of points, you have to sustain drives. And you got to have that guy you can go to on 3rd down. And that's what the Giants, I think, are missing on offense the biggest thing they're missing on offense is that reliable guy that you can go to on third down. I think I mean, if I think back into Giants history, I think of like Hakeem Nicks, who was a guy who I felt, he's a guy you could trust to catch the ball. I haven't gone back and looked to see whether his stats actually justify that or not. But I used to think of him that way, as that reliable guy you could go to. They had other guys, like that, who would make those plays when you needed to make them. And I feel like that's what they need to look for in this draft, is that type of player, among other things, obviously.
Among other things, of course. But you look at yesterday, and Theo Johnson, for example, is a young player who shows flashes of ability, but then he also shows you why he was a 4th-round pick, because as physically gifted as he is, the young man doesn't have great hands. And very often what you see from Theo Johnson, they're not drops because he can't catch the ball. There oftentimes are drops because he gets his hands all out of position. He gets his hands in places where they shouldn't be. And that's what happened yesterday on that interception. Mm-hmm. His hands were all out of position and didn't allow him to catch the ball. And it turned into an interception. And I know Jonathan Vilma on television said, "Oh, that pass has got to be down lower." That pass hit Theo Johnson in both hands and has got to be caught. I don't care. I don't care if it should have been 3 inches lower. That pass can't be batted up in the air and turned into an interception that costs you a touchdown. Theo dropped a second pass, and as talented as he is, you just never know what you're going to get from him. Darius Slayton, second week in a row, that Darius Slayton, the veteran of this receiver group, the guy that they should be able to rely on, not to be a number one, but to make the plays that come to him. Second week in a row, he has let his quarterback down. And it's really looking more and more like re-signing Slayton instead of going out and trying to find an upgrade was probably not the right move for the Giants. I mean, against the Commanders, maybe it's a perfectly thrown ball, maybe it's not, but Slayton is open behind the defense in the end zone and has both hands on the football, and you have to catch that pass.
Yep. Yeah.
Yesterday against the Vikings, you're behind by 3. There's 2 minutes to go in the game, or a little bit more than 2 minutes. You run an in cut, which I don't know what the problem seems to be with the Giants and in cuts the last few weeks, but you're wide open. The ball hits you right in the numbers, in stride at the 45-yard line of Minnesota. You catch that ball, you probably run for another 10 yards. You probably put Ben Sauls in position to kick a game-tying field goal and torture all of us with overtime. but you have to catch that ball. You talked about the Rams Seahawks game the other day. I'm thinking about the Bears game the other day when they had that incredible comeback. Give Caleb Williams credit, but there was a beautiful catch by a receiver in the corner of the end zone who was wide open. And then, do you know of any Giants receiver who's going to catch that ball? I think it was the game-winning throw from Williams to DJ Moore in the end zone. Is there a Giants wide receiver you could trust to catch that ball?
Yeah, absolutely not.
You have to help your quarterback. That's what Justin Jefferson does for Minnesota. Mm-hmm. That's what we see receivers around the league do. Tight ends, wide receivers, running backs out of the backfield. Who helps Jaxson Dart aside Wan'Dale Robinson at times, who's a really good player who I hope the Giants bring back. Tyrone Tracy at times when the Giants give him a little bit of a chance. But who else really helps Jaxson Dart? The Giants just don't have enough. It's when you think about it, it's pretty amazing with what they have that they average basically a touchdown more per game than they did a year ago. Pretty amazing that they've pulled that off. But if Jaxson Dart's ever going to be what the flashes that we've seen from him, make us think he can be, they have got to get him some help. There's a comment, about Daniel Bellinger, and yes, Bellinger helps Jaxson Dart. It has mystified me for a very long time why the Giants have sort of pushed Daniel Bellinger into the background. I know that he's not quite as good an athlete as Theo Johnson. He's not quite as big. He doesn't run quite as fast. But it sure would be nice to throw the ball to guys are going to catch it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, as far as Bellinger goes, Giants have were running a lot of 2 tight end sets, even I think 3 tight end sets. I think occasionally, right in that game, I think they had out there a decent bit also, and 2 tight end sets are great sets to pass out of, even though they have a reputation as sets that you use to run. Well, the Giants mainly used them to run yesterday, but you can pass out of those sets. And so if you've got Theo and Bellinger on the field at the same time, you can throw to Bellinger. And I was criticizing Mike Kafka's play calling. If I go back 1 week to the Washington game, speaking of Daniel Bellinger. Daniel Bellinger has, as you said, kind of been cooling his heels most of this season as they try to kind of like force Theo Johnson as
most of the last 3 years.
Most of the last 3 years. And so then last week was the same deal, except that they had this one series, I think, in the third quarter when they came out and Dart passed to Bellinger on 3 consecutive plays. And I think he made all 3 catches. And then they didn't throw to him again the entire game.
No. And even yesterday, the one time they do throw him the ball, on a little pass down the middle, looked like a little sort of a post route down the middle. He makes a nice catch for 15 yards or so, and the Giants get a penalty and go backwards.
Yeah.
So I don't understand the Bellinger thing. What I do find unfortunate is that Bellinger is going to be a free agent here at the end of the year. And I haven't asked him, but I would venture a guess that there are teams out there that think more highly of Daniel Bellinger than the Giants apparently do. And I would think there would be a bunch of teams out there that would be very happy to add Daniel Bellinger, as a TE2, if nothing else, if not a TE1. And I still think, and I think he's going to go elsewhere for a better opportunity. And yes, by the way, I do agree with Florida DJ here, who said Daboll still needed to be fired. Whatever the situation is with Jaxson Dart and Mike Kafka right now, Brian Daboll had 3.5 years to prove that he was a winning head coach for this entire football team. And I think it was clear when the Giants fired him that the answer to that wasn't the case, that the answer to whether he could be a winning head coach with the Giants was no.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I was sorry that it came to that, but by the time they fired him, I thought, well, it's pretty obvious that you have to make the move. My feeling now, though, is that given the way they've played these last few games, what is Joe Schoen's future with the Giants? And even though they said he's gonna lead the search, and so for a new coach and all of that, and it's just not clear to me that the best thing to do at this point with the Giants is to get rid of him too and fire and get a new GM who has a different attitude about about what types of players you should populate the roster with and how you should use the money that's available to you within the rules of the NFL to get good players on your team. And I feel
Well,
that Shane has really let the coaches down in that regard.
well, this is why I went to the argument of, is the talent base what we thought it was and what ownership tried to sell and what Joe tried to sell when Brian Daboll got fired? Um, to prove his point that the talent base was okay and that the coaching was the problem, to prove his point, they fired Brian Daboll with 7 games to go. They fired Brian Daboll at a point where the last 4 or 5 games of the season were going to be easier on paper or against weaker opponents on paper than what they had played, throughout the first part of the season. To prove Joe Schoen's point, he needed for the Giants to win some of these games. He needed, Wan'Dale Robinson to be big. He needed some of these guys like Drew Phillips and Tyler Nubin. Now Nubin played a nice game yesterday, but he needed some of these young players to step forward and show more. And the more you watch the Giants, they were close. They were close the last 2 weeks. Those were both 1-score games. But the more you watch the Giants, the more you question whether the talent base is actually what we're being sold that it is. And if it's, look, if they go 2-15, Tony, if they go 2-15, this will be the first time since 1974, when the NFL season was 14 games, that the Giants have had a 2-win season. 1974. Under that circumstance, I don't know how you justify keeping the GM. I just don't. Because we're not seeing the evidence of what the Giants say they believe, that the talent is better than the way it's performing on the field. We're just not seeing that evidence right now.
Well, I'll disagree with only one thing that you said in that, and that is you said questioning whether the talent base is good. I don't think there's any question left about the talent base right at this point, right? And I kind of said in my post game write up yesterday that it's like a scientific experiment. Fire the coach mid-season, and then see if things get better by replacing the head coach. And now we have the answer to that. Things are not better with the new head coach. And at some point, you have to say that the talent base is just not good enough. And I think it's easy to draw conclusions, but my impression of things as far as Joe Schoen goes is that he waits too long before finally giving up on players that he liked and moving on and doing something else. And we were talking about Justin Jefferson and earlier, and he's obviously a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Justin Jefferson should have been an Eagle. But the year that Justin Jefferson came out, it was 2021 or 2020 maybe, or something like that. I can't remember. But the year Justin Jefferson came out, the Eagles had the 21st pick in the draft, and Howie Roseman with Justin Jefferson on the board. And it's not as if Justin Jefferson came out of nowhere. He was one of that long parade of great LSU wide receivers that seemed to come out year after year after year, right? And Howie Roseman passed on Justin Jefferson for Jalen Reagor. And Minnesota had the next pick in the draft, and they took Jefferson. And that was one of Howie Roseman's biggest mistakes as GM. And so what did he do? He saw Jalen Reagor for 1 year and said, okay, this is not really kind of working out, and he went out and did better and then he traded up to get Devontae Smith over the Giants, and we're still suffering the the
Right.
results of that move. And then he went out and got AJ Brown in a trade, and so that's what Roseman does. I mean, Jalen Reagor held on for several years as an Eagle, but he just was relegated to the bench, and then they finally got rid of him, right? But that's what Howie Roseman does. He decides kind of early on that no, that's not good enough. I need to do something better. Whereas Shane, I feel like he waits 3 years until these guys, or 4 years until these guys' rookie contracts are over, without doing anything. And to me, that's part of the reason they're in this boat.
Unfortunately, I can't disagree with you. What I will say is that I think that Joe Schoen, in terms of sticking with quote unquote his guys, his draft picks, his signings, Joe falls in line with the vast majority of general managers who do not like to admit mistakes. Okay. They will exhaust every opportunity to prove that they weren't wrong. Okay. To prove that their evaluation, that their staff's evaluation was right. I always go back to the example of Eric Flowers and Jerry Reese. Eric Flowers was drafted 10th overall to play left tackle. Played left tackle for the Giants when Tom Coughlin's final year as a head coach. Ben McAdoo wanted to move Eric Flowers to right tackle. That's the story that we've been told, is that Ben wanted to move Flowers to the right side. Jerry Reese was having none of it. All right. Eric Flowers didn't move to the right side until his fourth and final year with the Giants. So Ben McAdoo, Jerry Reese just didn't allow it because he drafted Eric Flowers to be the left tackle, and that's what Eric Flowers was going to play. So I think the vast majority of general managers will fall on their sword to defend their highly drafted players and give them every opportunity, to prove that the GM and that the scouting staff and the front office wasn't wrong. And you have to give Howie Roseman, you give GMs who are willing to say, it's crystal clear I made a mistake here. Let's fix it. You give them credit because I think they're a minority, but it is the much better way to do things. Tony, I want to talk a little bit about the defensive side of the ball. Now, before we call it a day now, and with Charlie Bullen, I think the defense has been somewhat better. They gave up 3.7 yards per rushing attempt yesterday. They were pretty darn good against the run. They got an interception. They should have had a pick six. Abdul Carter with the silly lineup in the neutral zone infraction that cost them a touchdown. And what I'll say quickly about that is I do not ever understand these guys in the front three, the front five, whatever it is, lining up offside. You're right next to the football. Figure it out. You're right next to the football. If your helmet or your foot or whatever is hanging over the ball, pay attention to where you line up. But overall, Carter's been better. Charlie Bullen has made some improvements in the defense. But I almost hate to go here, but I'm going to go here. I am getting very tired of Dexter Lawrence's act. Getting very tired of Dex's act. I'm sorry. He's been a great player for the Giants, but we talk about great players needing to make plays to win games, and all credit in the world to Brian Burns on Sunday. All the credit in the world to Justin Jefferson for making the plays that helped his team win a game. When the game was on the line, Dexter Lawrence, who made one tackle on Sunday, when the game was on the line, Dexter Lawrence committed a holding penalty, and then he committed a neutral zone infraction. He jumped offside. That gave the Vikings 10 yards, toward their ultimate game-winning field goal. Dexter Lawrence again for not the first time this season, asked about how he played after the game on Sunday night, said, "Oh, I was in the backfield. I got near the quarterback. I made an impact," basically saying, "I did my job." And I'm sorry, you didn't do your job. You didn't make any plays. You had one tackle, which was a tackle for loss. You committed 2 penalties on the drive that cost your team the game. You're supposed to be the best player on this defense. You're supposed to be a leader of this defense. And you're standing there once again where you haven't played well enough, not taking accountability for your own mistakes. And I'm sorry, I'm tired of that act. I just am. I can't make excuses for Dex. I can't say, oh, it's his elbow. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. We're after week 16 of the season now. And as much as I love Dex, I've sat and I've talked to Dex one-on-one, and we had a great conversation a couple of years ago. Take some accountability. Take some accountability. Stop telling us you're doing just fine. When your team is 2-13 and you haven't made a game-changing play since week 4, when you had that interception against the Chargers, stop telling us that you're fine, because you're not fine, or you're not playing fine. It's about time that you took some accountability, for your part in this mess.
Yeah, I have no disagreement with that at all, and it's strange. I mean, his play is strange to me, but again, who knows how bad his elbow still is, and so on and so forth, right? So, but yeah, you should not answer questions the way he's answering them, and given his stature on the team, he should be kind of one of the leaders in terms of interactions with the press. And instead, I think you see Brian Burns being the actual leader of the defense, right, on that team. And Burns has been just great. And I feel like he's the one who represents that defense in the locker room and in the interactions with the press. And I don't know if Dexter Lawrence is doing things behind the scenes that we don't know, but he doesn't act like a leader, and he should, because he's the senior guy, and he's had the accomplishments and has the reputation in the league, that he should be that type of vocal leader, but he's not, and thank goodness they've got Burns, because Burns fills that role. And I wondered whether they should have paid that much money to Brian Burns when they made the trade for him, but I think he's been worth every penny, especially with the way edge defenders contracts are now. He's actually a bargain. So yeah, it's very disappointing to me, and I just don't get it. And it's just another one of the things that, again, it comes back to the coaching, and it's like, it's like, is anybody having a talk with him saying you've got to behave differently? Never mind playing differently, you got to behave differently.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that one. There is a question in the comments about whether or not the Giants should trade Dexter in the offseason, and that's such a hard one for me. I do not want to answer that with a yes, because I know how good Dexter can be. Okay. I know how much of an infectious personality he can be when he's up, when he's, when things are good, when he's being sexy Dexy, and he's showing us his dance, and he's fired up, and he's leading his teammates. But Dexter Lawrence is the longest tenured Giant. Okay. He and Darius Slayton are the only ones left from that draft class. I think was 2018, or was it 19? They're the longest tenured Giants, and Dexter, by nature, by the fact that he was a 2nd round pick and Slayton was a 5th round pick, he's been a Giant for an extra day. So he's the longest tenured Giant. And I just feel like when I get around Dex, I feel like he's resigned to it. And he would deny it. He would deny it. And if he hears this podcast and he sees me, he's probably going to get in my face about it. Okay. I wouldn't be surprised if he got in my face about it. But it's what I see and what I feel when I'm around him. It just is. And would he be better served, going to Buffalo, being traded somewhere like Buffalo, or somewhere like the Ravens, or somewhere, somebody that's competing, somebody that's going to be in that picture, every year in that playoff hunt, somebody where he can be a finishing piece on a defense instead of, part of yet another rebuild. Maybe. What could the Giants get for him? I don't know. I mean, you're not getting a top half of the first round draft pick for Dexter Lawrence. I know that. You're probably not getting a first round pick for Dexter Lawrence. You might get some day 2 assets for Dex. I don't know. I hate the idea of trading Dex, but I honestly think I wouldn't go out there and quote unquote make him available. But I think if somebody comes to you and says, and says we would give you A, B, and C, I think you have to think about, is that enough to help us for the future? I don't want to say Dex should get traded, but I don't think you should take it completely off the table.
Yeah, I think that's a fair position. I'd be reluctant to trade him, but I think a lot depends on who the next head coach is, right? And I really feel, I mean, and again, so we know there's going to be a new head coach. We don't know if there'll be a new GM or not, but I think a lot of this comes down to the head coach. And if you hire, especially if they hire a veteran head coach, someone who's been an NFL head coach before, someone with some level of prestige in the field, then I think as a GM, whether that's Shane or somebody else, you want to give that head coach the chance to go thumbs up or thumbs down on that type of question. You don't want to just kind of strip him of that player before he has a chance to even coach the team. Yeah, I'm with you. I have mixed feelings about what they should do. And the other thing is, it's not as if they've got a long line of interior defensive linemen just waiting to come in and dominate either, right?
Right.
So they're creating a big hole in a place where they're already not deep.
But the other part of that is, as you said, new coach, possibly new GM, and what do they feel when they come in about where the Giants are? Is this another from scratch rebuild? Okay. Is this another from scratch rebuild? Dexter Lawrence has been through 2 or 3 of those already. Okay. Is the best thing for the Giants to use Dexter Lawrence to get assets, or to try to build around him for a couple more years? And, maybe by the end of that 2 or 3 more years, remember, he's a 350-pound man, if not more than that. I think he's probably more than that at this point. Remember what happened to Snacks Harrison. Okay. Snacks Harrison was a great interior run defender, great player, at 350, 360 pounds. He was a great player until the day that he wasn't. And when he wasn't, he just plain and simple wasn't anymore. At some point, your legs are not meant, your knees and your ankles and all of that are not meant to do the kinds of things that those people do at 350, 360 pounds. And at some point, you know, when Snacks Harrison's legs gave out, they gave out and he was done. You know, it was like overnight. So you look at the size of Dexter Lawrence and you wonder if at some point that's where that's going to head, you know, and do you get out from under that preemptively, or do you ride with it as long as you can? And it's a tough call.
It is. And again, you know, it's you know, what do you do in the draft? And if you use high draft resources to bring in a defensive tackle, then it's easier to think about trading him, right? And you know, so the Giants, I don't remember whether they did this. I think they did it. Was it the same year that they traded Snacks Harrison, that they drafted Dalvin Tomlinson? I don't remember, or whether it, you know, was it separated or whatever. But
I don't remember. But the Giants for a long time had a history of drafting, and it almost always worked out to be a day 2 defensive tackle. Okay, it was Linval Joseph, it was Barry Cofield, it was Dalvin Tomlinson. You know, there were some other guys in that mix. But for a long time, you know, what they did was they would draft a guy, they would use that guy, they would preemptively draft somebody a year ahead of time to replace that player. And, you know, BJ Hill's another one that somebody mentioned, but, you know, and once that guy's rookie contract was up, they would move on from that player. Dexter sort of broke that string, you know, but I don't know. Like I said, I hate the idea of trading Dex, but I can't take it off the table. Tony, we've been going for more than an hour.
Yeah, really.
Unbelievable. And I feel like we could go. I feel like we could go for a while yet, but let's just do this. Let me throw it to you. Is there anything about this team other than maybe, you know, saying hooray for Ben Sauls? is there anything about this team that you want to talk about that we haven't mentioned, you know, before we call it a day?
No, I think we've said about as much as is worth saying about a team with 2 wins at this point.
It's true. and yes, hooray for Ben Sauls.
All right.
All right.
I don't know who I should root for against the Raiders next week.
Oh, I'm not sure, Giants. Well, I'm pretty sure a large part of the Giants fan base has simply decided that that's the Raiders, and they're not going to be told otherwise. Yeah. Anyway, Tony, thank you. Giants fans, thank you as always for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.